Good evening, and welcome to the April 3rd, 2017 meeting of the Merrimack School Board. If you could please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and Student Representative Zev Cernak is excused from tonight's meeting. We'll go on to item number 2, which is public participation. If you'd like to speak tonight, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. Oh, absolutely. And you just have to make sure your mic is on.
My name is Shannon Rand. I live at 1 Blair Road in Merrimack, New Hampshire. I've lived here for 40 years. I'm just curious, there's been lots of discussions just about how the Nashua School District and other districts are going about with the extra snow days. And I am curious to hear and see what we can do about shortening the school year, if not for this year, but next year if that does happen again. Those are my concerns, and I know that I'm one of many parents, and unfortunately I'm the only parent to be here for tonight to discuss that. So that's it.
And we do have it on our agenda for this evening.
Yeah, thank you.
Seeing no others, I will close public participation. And we'll move on to item number 3, which is first quarter curriculum review with Dr. Mark McLaughlin and Textures. I will introduce.
Great. So I'll have our guest tonight come up, and while they're setting up, I'll just begin, and then I'll introduce those folks. So tonight, what I'm hoping to do is to expand upon updates, earlier updates that I've provided to the board, all of which have focused on core content, the arts, and PE. And I want to just start by making sure that the board and the onlookers understand that those efforts continue unabated. Our simultaneous math curriculum development and program adoption initiative is entering its final stages. The draft curriculum document is slated for review by PERC later this school year, with appropriate updates to the board following that. The math program pilot evaluation has completed its first round. Currently, all materials are being transferred internally among evaluation teachers, setting the stage for the second round of program evaluation to begin next week, with the hope that we bring to the board a recommendation by the end of the school year. The K-12 Science Committee is in its final stages of development and will present to the board its final draft of the completed curriculum within the next few months. The K-12 Phys Ed and Health curriculum has made great strides. I actually did mean that to be a pun. In their developing curriculum work, particularly in incorporating national standards into their developing local curriculum, focusing on lifelong health and wellness. So all of our content areas are growing and reflecting, researching, and applying their new knowledge and to the work of curriculum and instructional delivery. But tonight, my intention is to highlight some of the work that's being done in the district that relates to other dimensions of the student that extend beyond the core content and that serves in a way like an umbrella encompassing all of the initiatives currently underway. So what we've come to learn, and these two folks in front of you tonight are chief among the reasons that our district has learned this, but not just because of them. They have a committee that's they're integrally working with, but we've come to learn that all of our efforts to develop and implement cutting-edge curriculum and rigorous instructional methodologies will never really reach their full success if the recipients of all these efforts, our students, are not well in mind and body. So tonight I want to briefly focus on the work of two groups, the District Mental Health Committee and the District Health Curriculum Team, both of which have been doing outstanding work on creating the conditions for students to be ready to learn. So just to reiterate, I don't want anybody on the board to think that all of our other curriculum efforts are not continuing full steam. They are. But really, really, really tonight I want the board and the public to just really to understand that we're taking it another step and really trying to create the conditions for our students to be ready to learn. So I'm just going to briefly provide you an update on the work of the district health curriculum team. So what they've been doing is working for the last year or so, really studying the national standards. Those are researched, developed by folks in the field who understand the connection between healthy living, healthy action movement, and successful learning, and lifelong health and wellness. So those standards are the foundation of the work that they've done, and they, excuse me, in addition to doing that, they have adopted the overarching goal of reducing risk as its driving imperative. So they've worked with the national standards, and they have taken upon themselves to choose the goal, reducing risk. So in every way that the developing curriculum for health is emerging, the theme is the same, helping students to understand how to reduce risk. The emerging health curriculum will focus on these core skills. Advocacy, so by that they mean advocacy of my needs. So really trying to help students recognize the things that they need to learn, to understand, to recognize in themselves, such that they can seek help when needed, either emotional help, physical help, but to advocate for our needs. Another core skill is self-management. So self-management meaning understanding how diet works, how nutrition works, how exercise works, how to make choices that reflect those core skills. Accessing good information using a variety of resources. With the advent of the internet and the opportunity for all kinds of information to flood our students, one of the things that our health teachers are developing in their curriculum is tools and strategies to help students understand the difference between good, solid, science-based information versus just anything that they might pick up and read. And you've often heard me talk at the district, at the board level, about work that we're trying to do in district to kind of have cross-pollination of efforts. And so that very thing, the idea that we are helping students to understand the difference between a good resource and a poor resource, is exactly the kind of thing we're doing in our English language arts programs, K to 12, when they study research to understand what's a quality resource to use in order to engage in research and what is not. In social studies and history, the same thing. So really, this is yet another example of trying to teach a content skill, this time in the context of health, that translates to other content. And then proactive decision making, meaning there are ways that students can learn how to take incoming information and then to determine what is the best course of action. And that is taught in the emerging, or will be taught in the emerging health program. So these skills will be taught and reinforced in the context of a variety of content, all of which are determined by the national standards. In other words, students will be taught content as in any other subject. And, this is important, the content will be introduced and accessed through the focus on these core skills. So and that's very much like conversations that we've often had in the English world when people talk about, well, I think it's really important I teach Macbeth. Well, no, I think I should teach Macbeth. No, I think I should teach. At a certain point, it doesn't matter who teaches Macbeth. What's really important is that it's a vehicle to learn really important skills like communication, critical reading, critical thinking. So it could be this, it could be that. So the core content is derived from the national standards, and those will be taught, core content like the impact of healthy choices, creating the conditions for students to understand the tenets of healthy living, the impact of these on lifelong health and wellness. Those have to get granular, so we talk about substance abuse, we talk about mental health, we talk about nutrition, we talk about all the kinds of content that makes up a good health curriculum, but always in the context of these core skills that we're trying to teach. So the goal is for students to independently take control of their own bodies, and in so doing, be ready to learn. So I really want to drive home the notion that's really what's energized the work of the health team and the phys ed team, is that notion that we want students to be physically capable of accessing the learning that we're providing them. And that's another thing that we're trying to tackle in the work of our curriculum development teams. So, having said that, we also know that we work in partnership with parents and community, and so as in every other way, we look forward to the partnership of folks, parents and community members, to help us to really support healthy choices. We talked about Merrimack Safeguard. The sort of the logo of Merrimack Safeguard is to help students and youth and families make positive choices. And so there's another parallel there. So this is just another way within our curriculum to help make that happen. So on my left, your left, is Julie DeLuca, the assistant principal at Thorntons Ferry Elementary School. And beside her is John Fabrizio, the director of special services in the district, and they're well known to the board. I've asked them to join us tonight so that they might provide the board with updates on the work of the district mental health committee and all its efforts to ensure that in addition to healthy bodies, we do all we can as educators to create the conditions for healthy emotional lives for our students and to better understand ways in which we can support those when they are in need. So I welcome John and Julie and look forward to their discussion with us tonight.
Well, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity once again to talk about our progress and where we are as a mental health committee, not only within district, but I'll allude to in a bit about our work outside the district and more of a collaborative effort in a regional scope now. And Julie will expand a little more about that too. But to go kind of back where we began, I can't believe it's been over a year and a half since we've stood before you and said, well, we have this idea of moving forward under Marge's charge and creating a mental health committee to study where we are. And we've been working diligently, meeting monthly, and bringing more and more questions to rise each day, but also more and more answers as we go along too. So, as a district mental health committee, we were formed to explore and identify ways to improve the mental health supports provided to our students. While we continue to work at rising academic standards, of course, for our students, as Mark was alluding to, it's important that we also raise the standards for what we do for care for our students and for our students in the area of mental health. We have three essential questions that I'm going to read to you for a second that guide us, really, and guided our work throughout what we've done. First one is, what's the depth and the scope of mental health needs in the Merrimack students, and what are the strengths and weaknesses of the system of care that are available to them as we exist? How can we blend district committees, state efforts to promote a broader communication, evidence-based practice and support the mental health needs of all students? What are the features of an interconnected and systematic framework of care and learning supports that will integrate mental health supports within the Merrimack School District? So as I read those, it's really, we've gone along that depth and the scope. We've done a lot of data collection over the last year and a half to see where are we and where do we currently exist and where are we spending the majority of our time as helpers in this district when it comes to our students' needs. We've also taken those efforts not only within our district but then expanded, and we've been meeting. We've met 2 times. We have another meeting planned with both the Merrimack, the Hudson, the Salem, and the Londonderry school districts, and representatives from our committee, and also representatives from each of their schools getting together from a regional effort to start talking about what data do we have out there to collect that can lead us to a picture of really what is the scope of our need, what resources are out there around us that we can expand beyond Merrimack and beyond the area to try to help us focus more on creating a system of care that not only extends beyond our walls but extends outside the walls of our district. Then looking at what avenues are there connecting to the state and how do we bring in more supports with a larger voice from the four different districts. And we've begun that work, and I'm going to turn to Julia to tell you about a little bit where our progress is right now.
Thank you, John. So I think we were actually here. We started the first day of school with the school board, with all of you, and I can't believe we still have snow. That's good, right, from my perspective. But here we are almost before April vacation. And at that meeting, I do recall that we really laid out our action plan and some of the things that we were looking to do more from some specific strategies as well as some tasks. So I'm going to speak to some of that today. And I really want to speak to what Dr. McLaughlin shared. Our goal this year in looking at the data, as you know and as you can recall, we have a substantial number of students that are at great risk in our community, whether it be from mental health, and then certainly what we've heard in the news around the opioid crisis and a number of other issues. But in addition, there is also the work that for all of our students around what we need to do in terms of emotional and social well-being and mental health. And that work is so important, as we know from the research, that will help prevent some of these issues that we now see challenging some of our older students and adults. And so this year was really about awareness. It was really about connection. And the awareness that we know, what the brain research has told us, that students learn when they're safe, when they feel connected, and when they feel like they belong. I don't think that's really different from us as adults either, is it? And so without that foundation, students won't achieve. They won't take risk. They won't fail so that they can try a science experiment unless they feel safe and they're connected. The work that we're doing is so connected and embedded with what we're doing in this district that I think it's important to say that our work is not one more thing for the plate. It is the plate. And that's something that we kind of talk about in the mental health field. It is the work. And so when we talk about mathematical practices and talk about perseverance and problem solving, that is our work. How do we get students to persevere? How do we get students to identify that there is a problem? When we talk about some of the literacy efforts, and recently some work done at the elementary about making meaning and the use of social constructs and non-cognitive work that they're now doing in some of our literacy and work with our youngest learners. We talk about at the high school, just your basic home rooms about how making sure that we're connected to kids and challenge day and some of the work we're doing there. We've talked at our staff meetings just about how the brain learns and how we need to be connected and students need to feel safe in order just to achieve in our world. So all this work is very much connected. When we're talking about a wellness policy, what component of that is social and emotional well-being? So all of this is very much connected. We, as you know, have established a system of care that looks at 6 components. Our work this year has been to build this awareness at every single building. We've had staff level meetings that have gone over mental health 101 to more difficult conversations around students that have attachment issues and students that are behaviorally challenged, and working with our staff around the awareness of that and the critical risk factors that are associated with that. Every single building has done yeoman's work to really have PD focused on that. We have done a substantial amount of work just in training up each other. Dr. Cassie Yackley, who's known in the field of trauma, has actually come to our leadership and has done some pretty significant work around trauma, specifically how it relates to the brain and how it impacts our students at school. And she will continue to do that work with us in April as we continue to, as a leadership team, grow in our knowledge. As you know, we just had former Chief Justice Broderick here as well, who was so well received, got a standing ovation by the staff as well as the folks that attended in the evening, just about we need to start having these conversations, and it goes along the work of Name It to Tame It. We will have a mental health collaboration day, again, getting all the helpers back together in our district. It's the work that we started with August Academy and that we shared on our first day of school. And so we just have and then we're going to be doing some work. We also have a committee that's focused on transitions, which I know has been a very important subject, especially the feedback that we received from all of you. And we have some very specific things that we're doing around transitions, especially as it relates to kids matriculating from school to school. And John's going to speak more specifically about that. So at any point, we can come back as a mental health committee and provide you with a lot more details as to what are some of our actions behind the task, but that's pretty much where we're at in terms of an overview. And then continuing our partnership with the Office of Student Wellness, continuing our partnership with the community and parents has been also an integral part of many of the work that we're doing, either as a committee as a whole or within our subcommittees.
Thank you, Julie. Julie alluded to our work as a transition team. We have 3 subcommittees that are up and active right now, and we have a committee looking at our professional development and planning and mapping that out for us about how do we collect this information, vet this information, and make good decisions and choices on what and when we bring forward. So we're working on that. We have an outreach committee that's just begun our work to really look at what is within our greater community, what can we access for our students and for our families. And that, again, has begun. We've had a few meetings, and we're starting to get a focus on kind of who are the who, and making relationships and connections and those personal relationships that we can develop, and going out and doing some outreach with our committee. Also, what Julie alluded to is transitions, and this is kind of one of the more telling committees. It's really pre-K through 12, which is interesting to get everyone together and talk about transitions and kind of the same issues we have preschool to kindergarten. We have 8th grade to high school, and then high school and beyond. And it's kind of interesting when you lay them out. And look at the issues. It's really very interesting. If you remember back when Laura Livy presented, and she had a backpack, and I remember back to that presentation we did, and she talked about all the things in a child's backpack, and we talked about what that really is and how we sometimes have to know what's in that backpack to really help educate, and that's what Mark was alluding to, really. And we had a very interesting work session a few weeks ago when we put up on the board, we said, what would you want to know about a student who showed up in your class? And we put this big circle on the board, and we kind of filled it in with 19 little different things, and in the top left corner was academic progress. Well, we're great at that, and we can tell you academic progress pre-K all the way through, so great, we get that. The other 18 things on the board, very telling. We have some work to do. We need to make some decisions, and we're working on that, and we're seeking our counsel from Wadley Star and Peters to kind of come in and help us guide us to what can we share, what is breaking confidentiality, what isn't, how do we know what to share and when to share it. And we're working on that as a committee. So that's kind of very interesting work at this time to say, to take a good look at that, again, pre-K through 12, and then beyond when we're transferring kids into the workforce or after. So that's where we began. That's kind of our update. But back to Mark's point, I believe that all those things in their back pocket are essential to learning, and if we don't discuss some of those, we can't get to the core piece of reading and writing.
So before I just ask if the board has any questions, I just want to really commend the work of this team because speaking for myself, they've really been transformational for me in understanding that how important it is that we attend to this dimension of a student's life, and not just students. I mean, we have faculty and colleagues as well who, on any given day or in any given year, face personal crises that the better we understand, the more able we are going to be to help them as well, so that they can get to the work that they need to do and want to do on behalf of students. So I think Julie mentioned about this being a year of awareness and the power of what we have all learned about creating these conditions for student success, really, and how much it goes beyond just the content. That's our main job. But we recognize through the work of this committee just how much else needs to happen so that we can ensure that the ground is fertile for that learning. So I really want to thank them, and they're the first to point out that they are supported by a big committee, and those people are also hugely, hugely, and equally instrumental in all this work. So with that, I wonder if the board has any questions.
I'll open it up. Any questions or comments from the board? I'll take Naomi, and then I'll take Andy.
This is a comment more than a question. As you no doubt remember, I came in midstream on this one. But even so, I wanted to commend you on something that occurs to me, and that is every time you've presented, it's become a little bit more complex. And that's a good thing. I think it's very, very easy for a district to grab something of this sort, do a relatively straightforward assessment, say we have all the basic components, and move on to the next topic. And instead, you're really digging deeper and deeper, and that's very nice to see.
Andy? Linda? Oh, Andy, then Cindy. I got you.
Okay. Well, thought I'd miss.
No, you did.
So one of the things that came up at the last, so Cindy and I are liaisons into Safeguard, and one of the things that came up at the last Safeguard meeting was promoting with Justice Broderick the event there. In your handout, you talk about all the different relationships you've got, and Safeguard wasn't one of the ones that you listed on this anyway. And I'm curious. No, well, I mean, you've been there too. So I think that there's a lot of synergy as we'll be talking about likely in the future, the sort of a broader purpose for Safeguard in terms of more of a community level. Getting more involved with the mental health aspect is, I think, a real good opportunity for the type of people that are representing Safeguard, a good way to extend Safeguard and be able to make it broader and maybe more community as well as district involved in a different area than in the past. I mean, we've traditionally been around substance abuse and resource officers and things like that, but I think the representatives of Safeguard can really add a whole lot more into this area. So I think you didn't purposely leave it off, but I think it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, that was an oversight actually on my part, and being a former member of Safeguard, right? It's not,
Yep.
yeah. And Laura Livy, who's
Right.
on Safeguard now,
Right,
is a
she was
part of
there
our
last-
committee.
She gave
yeah.
the list of all these things, so I'd heard some of this before.
Yeah, so I'm so appreciative that you added that, and
Yeah.
I will be sure to update
Right,
that.
because I
Thank
think
you.
it's something I'd like to, from a Safeguard perspective, like to see more direct involvement in
Absolutely.
both directions. Because I think
No,
it
I
really help
appreciate
move
that.
things along.
Thank you.
Yep.
Cinda?
When you came before us last, you had discussed some of the overall goals of the committee, and one I recall being to basically have more support for all students versus being reactionary for students that need it, and that would be for the resources in all of the different schools. Do you feel like you're able to make some ground that way? Or are you still in kind of the planning and strategic phases and the communication, train the trainer, that kind of thing?
So I think we're still a work in progress. Within each of the schools, there is a substantial amount of work being done around social emotional instruction curriculum. And I think when you, I don't know every school's presentation, but when they come before you, I know one thing for Thornton's Ferry will speak to some of that about student voice and how it relates to this issue. I think there's still more we need to do, but I think the first thing is growing in awareness. I mean, we could buy the best tools, have the best resources, but if teachers and the educators in the classroom are not on board, then it'll just be another binder or another curriculum that just sits in the bookcase. And so we realize that, and it is a complex issue, that without really growing the awareness and the importance of this and the science behind this work, then we'll be able to more successfully and more on a widespread basis implement more of the resources we need in terms of social emotional instruction. And that's the core. And again, each of the schools have pockets of it. I just don't think we're widespread as we need to be and as consistent from a continuum, from a scope and sequence from pre-K to K. But the conversations are happening. The silos have been they're still somewhat there, but people are now in committees together and having conversations and saying, wow, I didn't know you taught that. Maybe that's something we can do at our school. So I think there is, since the first day of school, there has definitely been more of a readiness and an acceptance to do this work. And so we've been very purposeful around not having too much implementation before we've had buy-in.
I'm not surprised to hear that. And just so you know, I think that the work that you're doing is so incredibly important and so valuable. And in Safeguard, I know it has come up a couple of times, and we have folks from Safeguard that are outside our community that have mentioned that they really look to this as kind of a best practice on how to approach that. I think that's a huge compliment from people that are in the field, that are in the know, and I think that I'm just thrilled with the work that you're doing. I would also encourage you to keep us posted. If you need anything from the board, let us know, particularly as we get to budget season next year. Continue to keep us posted and let us know how we can help.
Michael?
Thank you for the presentation tonight. I appreciate it. I wanted to thank the administration and the staff and district just addressing this. I think it's something that's obviously much needed, and I think that as we talk about it more, it becomes more accepted within the society and just helps overall. I also wanted to say thank you for working with other districts and other schools. I think that sometimes it is hard, from what I've heard, to actually do that, and I think it's great for not only the region, but also helps with just understanding resources and also probably shortening the timeline to actually implement some things. So thank you.
And I actually wrote down a couple of questions as well. So when you're talking about transitioning, you're talking about between schools, pre-K to kindergarten. And I know as a board, the one thing we hear a lot about is, and we get throughout the year, we'll get enrollments month to month, and we do see the movement. We know kids are moving into district and out of district. I'm sure that's going to have its own set of challenges, but definitely an area where we always hear about. That's where anxiety comes into a contextual area for us. And I know that what you'll be adopting in will be kids that come from a different culture as far as how their district does business. And so I think that's going to be an interesting thing for you to address. But I know it wasn't listed, but I'm taking the assumption that that's part of your transitioning model as well. Going out of district, of course, preparing them to go to a different environment as well, because we do know some kids that know their family's moving, and it will give them anxiety because they're comfortable where they are. So, those things I think will come up as well. The question I had two of them, and one was, now that you are working with Salem, Londonderry, and Hudson, and I think we've probably had a committee longer than they have, if I'm making an assumption, based on some earlier conversations. Are they, at this point, having different strategies and ideas in the way they're doing their mental health committee makeup and execution? And are any of them, would you consider transferable here, or are we becoming more the model than modeling them?
I'll start.
Yes.
So, very, very interesting. We had, sometimes you go into a meeting and in a meeting like that, and Michael, thank you for pointing out the fact that sometimes that can be hard because you have to balance between sharing and being too forward and doing that and saying, we'll go do this. And that was never our intention. It was really just to share kind of the journey and the study we've done over the last year and a half. And I think that by doing so, I think that what that sparked was I think I said to Marge when I came back, I'm feeling very hopeful for a long time with a pretty large problem that can make you feel pretty helpless sometimes. I said I came back from that meeting feeling like there was some great ideas shared across the table that other districts have done. Granted, they are more splintered efforts from different committees, such as attendance committees or dropout committees or things they've put in place in their district that have led them to some great decisions and great programs they've brought in that they shared with us, that we were writing feverishly down all their ideas that they shared with us and keeping notes. And I think that so although they don't have what they call a mental health committee, they're starting to begin that process and using things that already existed in their district that were standing committees that are morphing into this larger global look under the kind of conversations we've had. But so to answer your question, yes, they had things in place. Were they as defined and structured as we've gone about with our white paper and our process No, but they had different efforts that they had going on under a different kind of umbrella that they brought together into one. So our conversations are very, very rich when we go to those meetings, and they're very collectively sharing progress. And we're helping them map. They're helping us think differently about more avenues and more places to dig deeper, to Naomi's point.
Long term, I see you guys publishing, honestly, based on the work that you're doing. Can I weigh in on that? Sure.
Yeah, publish. Yeah. Dr. McLaughlin has already mentioned that. So,
No shock.
Yeah. So, John, I appreciate your insights. And I think one of the things that we have found that's different about our work, and where the Office of Student Wellness, too, has reached out to us as a model and asked to share our insights in some of the work we've done, is that many of the districts have implemented specific programs or specific tools or implemented specific resources, but nothing has sustained. One person leaves, that program goes away, we don't have a connection anymore with that community service. I had someone at DCYF, but now they're gone. The reason why is they haven't done this systematically. And we've talked very specifically about how purposeful, and I so appreciate all of you on this board who have supported that. The easy thing would have been just put something in place so the community knows that we're just doing something. But you asked us, no, take the time, be purposeful. It's become more complex. But what we're doing is going to be sustainable and is. And so that is a significant difference. Many of the things they've done in those districts have started and stopped, started and stopped, started and stopped. And because, again, they have not created a system of care that's not incumbent upon two people, right? It's going to be incumbent upon the whole system and building capacity. That is a substantial difference between us and most of the districts we discuss, without having a substantial, safe, and healthy grant or a Project Aware grant, which goes into communities like Laconia and Rochester, where they have millions of dollars to build a system. So that's my perspective.
Excellent. And then the final question I had was, mental health is such an, as you said, it's non-academic, but it impacts academics. So do you have plans for finding a way to measure outcomes from the skills that you're applying in those classrooms via your committee?
So as we do academically, also on this part of the equation, we also look at data, and we continue to collect data. So not only are we continue to collect data at a district level, but within each of our buildings, we're also collecting outcome data as it relates to some of the things that we're doing in terms of programs, some of the things as it relates to academic achievement. One of the things we've done very, very well in our district, and John spoke to it, is that we really have a good sense of where kids stand academically. And now we're using that information to now also measure how kids are doing social and emotionally. Let me give you an example. At the high school this year, we looked at some Power School reports looking at at-risk students who are at risk academically. We ran those reports, and we're now starting to use that information to have conversations about what are we doing to support kids academically that may have a correlation with social and emotional. Interesting enough, the research has shown, and what we've proven to see in our district, that there is a high correlation between kids that are failing and failing at the high school and some of the social, emotional, and behavioral challenges that they've had. So again, we are looking at the data. We're seeing these correlations. We know it's not something one is not, they're both, it's a whole child, it's together. And we're using that to drive what we do here in terms of some of the things that we want to implement and to reshape, because based on new data, we say, that may not be something that we will continue to do or we're going to do differently.
Excellent.
I'll jump into a little bit about that. And also, we started talking about our comprehensive classes at the high school, too, and talking about kind of the social emotional well-being of those students. And there's been some great data that's come out of kind of that model we've moved forward with. And one of the things really we got talking about was executive functioning skills. And really, how are these kids functioning within the classroom? Are they able to move towards independence in doing some of these and having their own self-help skills and having the skills to be regulated enough within the classroom to be able to do that and make academic progress. So we began to look at some mini lessons, mini curricular things that we're going to integrate, hopefully, into in our near future to start working with some of the students within that model. And that came out of our data we collected and looked at in our work with the high school. So that's where we began this year.
Gotcha. I saw Michael, you had a follow-up question?
Yeah, please. And maybe I just don't know enough about the overall view of this, but is there anything about empowerment in regards to children that may not be at risk or may not have as many challenges, but can actually take that next step and become maybe more of a leader within the school district? Is that a part of this also?
So much of the social and emotional instruction that is provided to all students, and again, this is a very purposeful, right? We just don't want to be providing supports at risk. So I appreciate your question, Mr. Thompson. A lot of that speaks to how do students problem solve? What are those 4 steps for problem solving? How do you make good decisions? So when things get tougher at the middle and the high school, right? How do you advocate for yourself? Who are your helpers in district? How can you be a helper? All of that is the bedrock of the work that we're doing, whether it comes from social emotional instruction, the cultures of each of our buildings. And really this notion of everybody as a helper is really something that we're starting to see kids talk about and do from our youngest preschoolers right in to our 12th graders. So again, it's because we're having these conversations.
So if I could just elaborate on that, what we've been talking a lot at the leadership table about trying to make connections. We have a lot of initiatives going on in district, and it could be that on any given day, any one of us could sort of see them as separate initiatives, but they're not. So just to give you an example, you were talking about empowerment. The term that we use, and you'll hear more about that in the coming weeks, is student voice. And one of the things that's fundamental about student voice comes from this idea that not every student is cut from exactly the same cloth, and that students learn in a variety of ways. And so for a long time, we've been talking with our teachers and training about differentiation. We've been talking with our teachers about establishing cultures of inquiry in our schools, in our classrooms. Those might seem unrelated to the question you asked, but really at their core, what they are is prioritizing and prizing the individuality of students to advocate for themselves. This is how I learn best. This is the reading level I'm at. That book is too hard for me. I am a kinesthetic learner. Those kinds of things filtered into the way we are training our teachers and our students to talk about their learning has a dimension of assertive kind of health where I don't have to bottle up and worry that my teacher isn't figuring me out or there is no avenue for me to express my need. And so it doesn't have necessarily a direct impact on one's emotional state or mental health, but it certainly has a bearing on it. And so I just want to point out also, John alluded to our freshman comprehensive program at the high school, where now we have special educators and regular educators wrapping around students in the 8th to 9th transition, specifically to provide levels of support we've never offered before. Our district RTI initiative is intentionally, at its core, it says, we have a student here, and this student isn't Mr. Thompson's issue because he's a special educator, or Mrs. Gualiumi's issue because she's a regular educator. This is a student, and all the people who are helpers, to use Julie's term, can bring their skills to bear on getting the student the supports that he or she needs. Have we perfected that? No. I think you've heard both John and Julie talk about the areas where we have exposed extra need and extra support. But at least I can say to you tonight that we are in the process of identifying those things and working to create systems that address that. But I really, it's important to me that people know that things that are already been happening are not unrelated to this issue we're talking about tonight. And then finally, I would just add, because something that John and Julie mentioned reminded me, the three of us had the opportunity to have dinner with Justice Broderick between the afternoon and the evening session, and it was wonderful. I think any one of us could just, kind of listen to him all day. But one of the things that we talked about was how important it is to be careful about issues like this. Not because we are afraid to talk about them, but because when we tackle issues of the emotional health of our students, we're touching on something very, very central and core and very important. And so it begs the question, how quick do you want to move? If moving quickly runs the risk of making decisions that in the end are expedient, but not necessarily in anyone's best interest. So while the impulse might be to speed along and to adopt this or begin to do that, I think from Justice Broderick's own experience and what he's been advocating to us is take the time it takes to do it right. And that's been a mantra we've used for a while. Get it right, not get it fast. And so I think that in that spirit, we're taking this seriously and saying, we're touching on something very important here, and we better get it right. And getting it right sometimes is not the same thing as getting it done quickly. So,
Cinda?
Will there be topics around this for August Academy this year that you've thought of? I know it's a little early, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you've had some thoughts on that already.
It's not early at all. Yes, the slog to August, we call it. Yes, we're going to be talking about that, and definitely this is, I'm sure, on some level, it's going to be something that we'll have appearing at August Academy. We'll have more to say about that later.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, we thank you for your work. We thank you for taking the time tonight. And you didn't miss the baseball game because it was an afternoon game, so. I'm a Yankee fan. We're not. I totally did. Ugh, I'm from New York, though. So we're on to item number 4, which is the initial discussion regarding repurposing the O'Gara tennis courts. In your packets, you all received an email I got from Town Council Chair Harrington, which the Town Manager Eileen Cavanaugh was also given, that basically we're getting asked what our intentions are for the tennis courts per se, but it's the O'Gara property. The O'Gara property agreement expires July 1st, 2018. So what we need to do is have we've had so many discussions, I think we're blue in the face as a collective, but I think players have come and gone. So we want to be fair as well. So the O'Gara complex includes the tennis courts, the basketball courts, the ice rink, the skate park, and the parking lot. So with all that, I know that we've had talks about, with our planning and building committee, about using that site as possibly the appropriate site for a future SAU SPED office. We talked about the tennis courts being in a state of disrepair and looking less than exemplary to those who may be driving by and considering Merrimack for their home. Not that it's really slowed down the real estate market because it's pretty hot right now. But we always want to put our best foot forward as a community and as a school district, and we've talked extensively that site is not our best example. And with that, I think we need to come to what I'll call a formalized conclusion and then document that position to the town council so we can prepare next steps. In preparation for tonight's meeting, the one area that is not just playing surface is the lighting that is part of the tennis courts. So I asked if Mac and Tom Tussaud could collaborate on that and give their opinion of what, if any, value that would bring. So, Matt, could you just weigh in on that first?
Yeah, thank you. When looking at the O'Gara Drive property as a potential building site, we have taken the existing building and its configuration and placed it in that site in various locations to see how it works. And first you have the building site, then you have the associated grounds and parking, and then when you're in the construction phase, you have the construction site. So the amount of land and space needed from the construction site coming back down to the finished site to the building is pretty vast. So the lighting that's there, we would prefer that to be removed. And as far as the rest of the property, if everything could be brought to back to its natural state with no tennis courts or whatever there, that would only save us some time and some money if we're going to construct on that property.
Are there questions or comments about this area? Michael Benandy?
I guess I have a question in regards to the agreement that was initially put out. Does it state in the agreement how it needs to be returned, the property returned at the end of 2018 is my first question.
Yes, but it doesn't have any function to it.
Yeah, it's essentially it says, if at the end if we choose not to renew, then it needs to be returned in the status that it was. That I think it does say that at the end. If you don't renew at the end of the lease, they have to return it to us in the state that it was before, unless we chime in and say, well, don't take that part down because maybe it has value. Because it was all constructed with grant money. And the idea is when it's released back, the grant money is no longer they're not under the control of the grant money to keep it up to speed or anything like that. So I think it's sort of the way it unwinds. So we as a board decided previously that we weren't going to renew the lease to the town for that thing. So now I think what is up to us is how we want the land returned to us based on that scenario. So I think that's how we got here.
Yeah, if I can chime in, you're absolutely correct. Return to its natural state. I don't remember the exact wording unless the board chooses to modify it any, piece and portion. So that's where it's at this moment.
Right, and so with that, there's I call an ample amount of time for the town to prepare for what they may want to sustain as services to the community at other sites on their different properties. The assets that are there, things like the skate park ramps, if they want to repurpose those other locations. The ice rink happens to be completely portable as it is anyway, so that's not something we have to worry about either. So that's gone when the thaw happens. I don't know when that thaw will be this year, but those are the things that we have going for us. Go ahead.
So there's two dimensions to this. There's what the town is obligated to do while the lease is still in place, and then what happens afterwards. Now the tennis court, the reason this tennis court thing is that the town was in, I'm going to use the term, anybody on the council, I'm going to use the wrong word, but they were in breach of the agreement by letting the tennis court go to disrepair. So they had two options, either reconstruct it so it was there or remove it. And if they remove it, they're under obligation to find another place in town that fills as a recreational area to replace the removal of the tennis courts. So the discussion that we had as a board a year ago or whenever it was around they didn't want to spend the money to repurpose it, and they were going to identify an area out of town, and then there was what do we want to do, what do we as a board want them to do with the area that used to be. And there was a big discussion at our joint meeting about tearing the fence, ripping it out, whatever, and I, for one, had thought we sort of made an agreement of what we were going to do with it, but apparently I was not fully aware. But I guess the reason we're having this discussion is, first of all, the town council said, what are you going to do with tennis courts? What do you want us to do? And then the second part, as Shannon brought up, is we need to have a plan that talks about the rest of it as we reach the end of the lease. So
I was just I was going to further that after the question was, I mean, we're at the point where we have to make a decision and let them know now because it takes a year for fundraising, whatever, if they want to do for the skateboard park. So I think it might be just better to give them an overall answer versus just the tennis court. And I think based off of everything that's being said, we want the property returned to its natural state at the end of 2018 unless. So I guess at this point, since we've discussed it many times, are we looking for
The goal
motion
for,
to-
yeah, no, well, the goal for tonight's meeting was to first of all get you guys up to speed on plan, so that way you know what you're supporting or not supporting. So that's been, I think, done. If there's any questions, let me know. The second thing is, I think we want to have a formal letter to the town council with our intent to reclaim the land back in 2018 and how we intend for it to be returned. So the goal, I think, as a board would be to have a draft letter at our next meeting that we could, if there are any modifications, if it's good to go. I'm not a bad business writer, I have to say. It's one of my strengths. But if we can just basically bang out a letter that we could deliver to the town council with our expectations, then they can plan accordingly, and that gives them ample time to do that. So the goal would be for the 17th to have our the letter done. And then if there's any modifications, to finalize it at our first meeting in May, and then deliver it with the expectation that gives them 13 months to do as they see appropriate. Andy?
So I agree that we want to give them advance warning so they can plan. But will our letter request that they take the action on the tennis courts immediately and then worry about the rest of it by the end of the lease?
I think as a board, what would be fair for us, and, it's still their land till the 1st of July, 2018.
Well, no.
Time out?
Technically, they have to do something with the tennis courts because it's in breach of contract today. The tennis courts are not functional for the purpose, and that's how we got into this discussion in the first place. Right. So, based on that, I think that they're under obligation to tear that part down and identify another place in town before the end of the lease. At least I think, I'm chiming in administration, I think that was the case.
Marge?
Can I?
I think it was the case. I think, however, that right now it's probably in the spirit of cooperation to give the ultimate vision about what the board expects, and then to see what's doable in steps, perhaps, to help them along. But it is not to stay in the state that it is right now. And as the snow goes by and we have the actual area, I mean, it looks worse with every, passing month, if you will. However, I'm not sure by tracking town council meetings whether they've actually talked about the area, meaning they've got a plan for like step 1, step 2, step 3. I think they're waiting on the board to, in print, say what it wants. And then what I would hope is that we would work with them in the spirit of cooperation to get it to its rightful state. But to put dates certain, other than July 1st, 2018, I'm not sure that that's helpful. It's just to say, this is what we'd like, and as soon as you can make it happen, and just...
But no later than.
No later than. July 1st, 2018 is what's in the documentation. It probably would be good, to just go back and look at the joint meeting the last time you met, because literally that's a rendering. So in preparation for the letter, we could give off those minutes as well.
Mm-hmm. Michael?
So I guess I'll go back to kind of my question is, do we need to make a motion in regards to that letter to actually make a statement of what the board wants to have done with that property? Because I guess right now I'm hearing that we have the ability to possibly keep parts of it and have them pass it over, or we have what we feel we want is that the property is returned as a natural state. So I guess as a board, before we draft a letter, do we have to make a decision of that is what we're asking for?
Go ahead, Mark.
So where tonight it was raised up, and I think certainly the chair can speak for herself, but I think tonight was to make sure that all 5 of you realized that this communique had come and that some action needs to be taken as soon as possible. Hearing you talk, it might be helpful to make that motion on the 17th of April. what's 2 weeks? I mean, and
Yeah.
to give you the minutes from the joint meeting so that you have those in hand and then make the motion that night. Meantime, the chair and the chair of the council and I can all speak to and make for ready. But at least tonight you
So,
realize something
I
needs
guess that's
to
my
happen.
point. How are you making something ready that we haven't actually voted on yet? So you're making a letter ready for a recommendation, but we haven't made a recommendation as a board? I guess I'm asking for point of order there. I guess.
Well, I guess I'll just chime in. I guess there's a stake in the ground that the previous boards have put that we don't want anything left on there. I guess it's a valid discussion to say, let's take the pulse of the board today and say, do you agree with what the previous board said, that we don't want the skate park on that property even after the end of the lease and everything else? And do we want that to occur? Because you're the two members that weren't, you were there at the joint meeting, right? But you, Mike, and Naomi weren't. So I don't know. That'd be what I'd like to see discussed.
Cinda?
Well, and I see the letter as a starting point, where we have food for thought this week. And if there's a starting point, we can say, we don't like this, can we switch it to this? And certainly, I think it's kind of half dozen one the other.
Naomi?
I think that it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. I think that we could move pretty quickly to ask that a letter be written, and that might meet what you're talking about. Or we could leave it informally.
Okay.
Either one.
Well, I guess, I think to Andy's point, I want to make sure the pulse of the board is consistent with the pulse of the last board, because we 5 are delivering that letter. So versus, prior boards that had, other membership who vetted this issue, but we never came to what I would call a formalized conclusion. It was the hanging chad, as you would say. Bringing it back to the olden days.
And I think that's what I'm asking. I'm
Yeah.
asking, like, what is the process that you're asking for a pulse of the board? How do we do that? Do we just say, hey, yeah, move ahead? Or do we actually put something forward? Or, yes, I'm good either way, but I'm just looking for an explanation, I guess, of the process.
Okay. Andy?
So just so you know that, so the previous board said, take care of the tennis courts initially at some point, and then we want the rest of it returned at the end of the lease as it was, right? And in addition, there was action taken by the board, a charge given to the Planning and Building Committee to investigate what it would be to assume you had a completely naked land there and move the proposed SAU sped building from its previous location, which was at the edge of the high school parking lot, and putting in that location to see whether it was feasible or not. So there was so the charge, when the Planning and Building Committee comes and talks about their charges, that's one of the things they're responding to is, as Matt said, where would it fit on the land, assuming nothing is there. So that's where the stake in the ground was. I would like to see us, as a pulse of the board tonight, say, do we agree with that stance, at least that we want it cleared out, or do you have a different viewpoint before she puts the letter together? I'd like to see that discussion.
Okay. Cinda?
And I think there was another piece of information that goes back years and years, before I think most of us, where it was believed that there was ledge underneath those tennis courts, which we've
There's
never
no documentation we
We've
can
never seen
find, yeah.
documentation or proof, other than the fact that when, if I recall correctly, that when there was a quote to put in new tennis courts, that was part of the quote. There was no engineering studies, but I feel like it was on the.
It was a suburban legend, I would call it.
Okay, all right.
That there's no land study done, but that there's probably legend there, so you're going to have a problem. It's speculative.
So I think wasn't part of the charge for the Planning and Building Committee then to have some determination if there was ledge or no ledge?
Go ahead.
Yes, in talking with Steve Keach, while we were doing the track in the back of the high school, we had access to some very heavy equipment that kind of made its way down O'Gara Drive and into that general area.
Sort of.
Like a field trip.
Yeah, like a field trip. And it come to find out with Steve being there and his best opinion, that a lot of the ledge there is just very large boulders and whatnot that can be broken up with a pneumatic jackhammer put on a dozer, similar to what we've done before, which really isn't any additional cost. It's not a big slab of ledge, and giving his knowledge of the topography and the land in that area, he doesn't see it anything more than that. So.
I mean, it seems like it was an old riverbed, like very sandy.
Yeah,
and-
but it's really, everything's very sandy around in that area except
Yeah.
that little particular spot.
Oh.
But it's not a big, thing of ledge where you're gonna start blowing it up and the upper elementary school's gonna jump a couple feet off the ground. So it's nothing like that.
I just wanted to make sure they had that background too. that
Yes.
there was some-
Yep.
I mean, if I actually great information, but I think it's what I'm just trying to understand is how we move forward and say yes, we want it bare slate. So if you're just asking me if that's what I want, I guess that is. But I figured it would have been a motion to say we move to like a firm.
If I can
but that's what we're
reiterate, if you're seriously considering putting the central office there, you will have to have a clean slate of land,
Yeah,
period.
no,
Everything needs to be gone.
I mean, I personally totally agree. I'm just trying to move it along, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess here's where I'm at. I know how I feel. I've been at this for a long time with this nudgy little project. But I would say I don't want to be unfair to you. If you feel you want the minutes, if you want the 30-year-old document, we can get it to you.
I don't want any of that. I want to move to affirm that we want this
Well, I think
as a clean slate.
do I have a second then? Okay, we're there. I didn't want to pressure you guys into a decision that you had to
I'm
have.
pressuring you at
Okay.
this point.
So, but I didn't want to put you in that place. So we have a motion and a second to take the position as a board that we want the land cleared of all of these activities so we can use it for our own purposes. Okay, are there any comments to the motion? Andy?
So I know that the result of this motion is going to be a letter that you're going to
Yes.
do a draft of, right? So, and we also know the lease ends the end of July at the beginning of
The
July,
end of June.
end of June 30th, 2018.
Yes.
We also know, based on the previous discussions, that we know for sure that not only do we want to get rid of everything, but the tennis court is the issue that they brought in front of the state. So it's got visibility in front of the state. So my comment would be, and especially based on Chairman Harrington's letter where she says, has there been any further discussions? Might we start talking about this now so we can plan on something in the spring? I think the town council is expecting to take action, at least on the tennis court removal, sooner. So I would, as part of the motion, I would think that the clean slate and to authorize the town to do the work on the tennis courts immediately should they decide to, because that's already been raised.
Okay, Michael?
I move to amend the motion so that allows the town to take action that they consider necessary between now and the end of the lease, and we request that the property be returned to its natural state no later than the end of the lease.
Okay.
It only works if your second approves your modified motion.
Okay.
Thumbs up.
Rose, those are going to be some great minutes. So what I would have to say to that is, it's their land to use as they see fit until June 30th. If they want to get more things started earlier, they will be better served for it. So giving them the intention that we are going to have the raised land, I think gives them license to start working now and getting as far as they want to go until June 30th, where it has to be back to its natural state. Cinda?
Does natural state include grass?
You know, honestly, if they didn't want to plant grass seed, we wouldn't ask them to. If weeds want to go up there, it's what's been growing through the tennis court for the last 5 years, so we know that thrives. So, so yeah, I would not. Just a level dirt state. We don't need it to have.
Yeah, you don't need it loam
No.
and seeded or anything like that. Yeah.
Yep. Save the money. We're not going to use it anyway. Andy?
So I agree with that. I think that that's fine, but I will just make a comment to the board that if we make a proposal to the town in the coming years to put the SAU sped building in that site and it fails, we as a board will then have to take up some sort of a discussion as to what to do with that land, because essentially it'll be a sand pit once they get done. That I think would not. You think it looks bad now with the tennis courts having a sand pit there would be, I contend, worse. So I just want to sort of make the statement that we have to live with both potential things that happen.
It'll be the sophomore parking lot.
And that's why I asked, because I think it will be a big eyesore, with weeds growing up and everything. So we might want to have that discussion, and at least the bare minimum. It is smack dab in the middle of town, so.
Yep, absolutely. So, but with that, I think we can, it's, again, technically until June 30th, it's their land. If they wanted to plant weeds, they would have the right to do so, as long as it looks good by the time June 30th rolls around. So that's kind of that weird thing, it's collaborative, but they're still in charge, but it's still our land. So it's been a strange makeup since 1972. So, but it's coming to its end. So, I will draft a letter. We can go over it at our next meeting. If you have any questions or if I'm missing a point, we can do that. Oh, we should probably do that first. There was a motion, a second. Let's take a vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0-0. I will just give a courtesy call to Chair Harrington that we discussed tonight what the motion was, and then she'll expect documentation that their board can act on in future weeks, in the coming weeks. Wow, that was finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel with that one thing. So, good stuff. So we're on to item number 5, which has the audience at the edge of its seat, probably at home, and one person here. Thank you for staying. And that is the proposed last day of school based on instructional hours due to snow day impacts. So Marge and Mark, I think you have some data to share.
Thank you. I think first I want to start off by saying that tonight, when Mark renders what we've come up with, that it's very important to say that it's going to be put forward as a tentative date, because just as late as Friday afternoon and Saturday, you realize we experienced another snowstorm. And so in dealing with the Department of Education, the expectation is that we will make up the time, and therefore, if you're counting instructional hours, you're still expected to make sure that you meet the letter of the law. So when we put this forward tonight, and when we publish it on our site and so on, we will say the tentative last day is. And I think another thing to say, as we've worked with the Department of Education, is the fact that there is always the expectation that you're going to operate within the school calendar. In other words, I really feel a lot of times that when persons look at the calendar and they see the MU, which stands for makeup, that they're not really realizing that those makeups are there for a reason. They're expected to be there. And when you talk to the State Department, the expectation is that you're trying to live within those makeup days. It's an important thing to say, because I think as we go year to year, sometimes you don't have to use them, but when you do, the expectation is that you'll operate within the given calendar. I also want to say that a lot of people in district have weighed in on this calculation, obviously Mark being the chief one, but then to say also that the administration in each of the buildings has really deliberated over the hours, because you're checking, double checking, triple checking. And I want to say that the president of the Merrimack Teachers Union, as well as educators that we've conferred with, have been very collaborative in nature. And when you're going to make any kind of a modification, obviously it's important to have everyone in sync. So as he gives you the rendering, I just want to say that I'm very appreciative of all the efforts that have been put forth thus far. And so with that, please.
So I'd begin by just reiterating the point that the superintendent just made about the school calendar. It's required that school calendars add makeup days. And so on any given year, if there is no snow, then you count 180 days from the first day of school, and you get to, in this case, June 15th. And if there were nothing in between the first day of school and the last day of school, that's when we'd get out. But I just think it bears repeating that we're school districts are required to insert makeup days because we live in New Hampshire, and the likelihood of snow is great to the extent that school would be called. So it bears in mind that we have makeup days built into the calendar, and so our assumption and the state's assumption is that those days get used before anything else is considered. So having said that, I'm just laying the groundwork for how we've come to the conclusions that we've come to. Having said that, because of the number of snow days and delays this year, if we were to follow the days route, we would easily be at June 26th. However, there are a lot of reasons that the community and the district and teachers wish that it would not be that date. So we're allowed by the state to count instructional hours as well as days. Instructional hours provide us with an opportunity to make sure that we satisfy the state's requirements, but not by counting 180 days. This is a year where that becomes very helpful, because if we were to count 180 days with the days off, we would be deep into those makeup days that are built into the calendar. So what we did is we spent a lot of time looking at the required hours for each of the levels, because there are different required hours for each of the levels. So at the elementary grades, it's 900, the elementary grades, it's 945 hours. At the kindergarten, it's 450 hours in a year. And at the high school and middle school, it's 990 hours. So again, 990 hours minimum of instructional time, or 180 days. So when we did our calculation for the elementary grades, we realized that we're in quite good shape relative to instructional hours, with the exception of kindergarten, and I'm going to get to that in just a minute. We have a few hours to make up to get to 990 for the middle school and the high school. So what that means is, when do you make up hours? You make up hours in a school day, right? So we would need to add, we would need to talk about days when it comes to making up hours, but we're calculating hours. So the issue of kindergarten is this: 450 instructional hours required. We are not required to make up morning kindergarten on the days that there are delays, but we are required to make up kindergarten on the days that there is no school. But because the day is 2.5 hours long, it takes a considerable amount of time to make that up. So what we have suggested is this: we will have 3 full days of kindergarten that we're going to call kindergarten transition days, the purpose of which is to provide these students with an opportunity to gain access and understanding about the first grade curriculum. Those transition days are going to be 3 full days. We will work with parents in the coming weeks to describe what the expectations of those days are, work with transportation and food service to make sure that we have lunch and so on provided, and working with the principals to make sure that we have really good days for our students. If that happens, we are able to get out of school on June 21st. June 21st. I want to just make this point that that's tentative now because, as the superintendent just said, parts of the state may be facing snow tomorrow. The southern part of the state might face snow still within the next few weeks, so we want to be very careful about this. However, as of right now, if we attend to the kindergarten the way that I've suggested, the last day of school following instructional hours can be and will be June 21st. Just one last thing that I think is important, because there have been things described in the paper that the various papers that haven't really been accurate. The issue of waivers is a very, very misunderstood issue. So I want to be clear. I've spoken to a woman named Amy Clark at the State Department. Amy is the one who is in charge of this issue. And she has been very clear. Waivers are granted in cases of extreme conditions. So, for instance, the Mother's Day flood of several years ago, the case of a fire in a building or a roof being, collapsing, that would cause students to miss school, would be in the category of some action that would some event that would require or allow for the request of and the granting of a waiver. Regular snow days are not. So I just want to repeat that, because I think there are folks who think, well, just ask for a waiver. That cannot happen when you have built into your calendar makeup days that's required. And it's also been suggested by some about adding minutes. When you get to the point that we have gotten where you're really trying to crunch numbers and do instructional hours and so on, when you talk about adding minutes, it becomes a very loaded, complicated issue when it comes to things like contracted hours, the contract that we have with teachers, when it comes to transportation, sports schedules. The list goes on and on and on. So we would only consider adding minutes if we were facing the using up all of our makeup days and still going further. Then we would consider that. But since we're able to deal with our instructional hours and achieve those within the makeup schedule that the superintendent produced last year, we're not needing to go in that direction, and a waiver is off the table. So, June 21st, 2017.
And hands are up. Cinda.
Just a quick clarification on the transition for the kindergarten students that you talked about. And first of all, I think it's a very workable solution, very smart, and a lot of work that I know you went through to do that, to calculate that with a bunch of people in our district. So thank you. But when you talk about the makeup days or those full days for the transitional kindergarten, is that for both sets of kindergarten, AM and PM?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Any other? Michael.
I also want to thank you for that very valuable, I would say, thing that you've done with the kindergarten. I think that it solves two challenges. One is the days, and then two, I think it's very good for the kids to actually have a taste of that before coming to school next year. You did mention adding time. I know that in the last meeting I did request kind of a more detailed understanding of everything that would go into adding time into the school day, and I'm obviously not proposing it for this year, and I actually wouldn't propose it as a quick step measure, but I think that some people may, especially in the town, may want to understand what would it take to add time to a day currently, so that we might have a smaller school calendar just by going to hours instead of days. I'm figuring that since it's not on the agenda item, it's not something that we're going to discuss tonight, but I would like it to be discussed of what the complications would be if we were to decide to do that, and how long it might even take to implement it if we were to do that. Because I think it is something that I've had multiple people ask, how could we shorten the school calendar in general? So, thank you.
Andy?
Yeah, I concur with Michael. I think we've talked in the past, especially at the last meeting, we talked about doing this in two chunks. One, how we solve this year, and two, looking holistically at the calendar just generally. What have we learned? What's there? I think that you guys have done a level of diligence and administration that we haven't done in the past about what hours really mean and all your calculations. So I know in the past when we had Amherst come a couple years ago, I think it was, to talk about their decision to do hours and the pros and the cons, I think we learned a lot. I think the hard nut to crack was sort of like, well, what do hours mean as you go across high school and elementary school and the kindergarten, and how is the counting done? So I think it's been valuable work that you've learned and done this year to get through this, to help understand it. So I do look forward to having a more discussion in a future meeting about what this means and should we as a board look at it. Because I know we're time-wise, we're coming up, we've got the support staff agreement next year to do and the teachers the year after that. So the timing might be good if we wanted to go that way as a board, at least as an option. So I think that's good too. But overall, I think this is great work that you did. I think getting 3 days back by not really doing anything except arranging at the kindergarten, I think is a great way to do it. I know that that so far only Nashua has done the added time, and it's moved them in by a couple of days, but it's not like all of a sudden they're getting out June 1st or something silly like that.
Nashua's getting out June 20th.
Right, so
Right.
one extra day. So
Mhm.
for us adding no time and just modifying kindergarten, we're getting all close to that time, which
Right.
is really good. So I'm real comfortable with this proposal. So
Cinda?
I would also like to add that this transition idea that you've come up with also supports the work like the mental health committee was talking about and the focus on transitions too. So it's nice to be able to see a solution that kind of interconnects some of the work the district is doing.
And this is my second time since I've been on the board where we have had the opportunity to convert to hours versus days. And I think I'm the only one at the table that experienced that. I think it was one of my first years on the board. The one thing I know, I have a lot to say on this subject, obviously. It's been a long time coming. And it's been 7 years of being here, so I've seen quite a bit. So the first thing, this is the first appropriate time that we really could talk about this, because when you think about Saturday and how it snowed for 26 hours just 3 days ago, that it's inappropriate for us to come up with conclusions before we even have gotten through the storm. We were still in the storm still the heart of the storm season. And April Fool's was no joke this year. But honestly, if you think that this is the first time that the superintendent has thought about it, every time she closes the school, and I know we've talked about years over years, this is always something that's on the radar, and it's about what are the solutions. When the buzz started happening, when parents were starting to worry about these snow days, we didn't have a commissioner of education yet. We had no one to ask. We didn't know what he wanted. We didn't know if he'd be confirmed yet. So there was a lot of concern being expressed in the community, and we heard it, but there was no appropriate avenue to get a conclusion because of the timing, because of the structure of our new state government and the Department of Education transition at the top. There were so many moving parts, it would have been irresponsible for us to waste our superintendent's time going to Concord and banging on doors. So the time is here, and the time is now, and the time is right to have this conversation. The one thing, as we did talk about Amherst, as we were hearing people adding minutes. I have opinions on those, and I'm going to share them because it's all right. This is the night to do it. The reason we're having this conversation, the reason we have the opportunity to make the end of school June 21st, barring any other act of God, is because we always have a very heavy focus on education. It's what we do here. So with that, we always have more hours than the state requires because we want to deliver a strong, robust, rigorous education, and we don't hit the minimum to do it. The weather has caused us to face looking at the minimum as our best option, but we've always exceeded instructional hour expectations because that's what we do here. So, and because of that, we have a safety net. If we go to an instructional hour model, we are aiming at the minimum instead of at our instructional hours being something that gives us a card to play, honestly, in tough seasons like this. So having the structure that we've had is working for us this year, and it worked for us, I think it was my second year on the board, because of the way we do business in Merrimack. And it is going above and beyond what we have to do what we want to do to get what we need, which is a strong education. So eyes on the prize here. And I know that was the one thing that, I'm not going to knee-jerk and respond to social media. I've never done that one day of my life on this board because I'm not going to represent the board with what I'll call a short-sighted opinion on a long-sighted problem. But this has been months and months of study, planning, impact analysis, and here's where we are. And I think we gave something palatable for our last day of school, and that's really the work of our staff, our leadership. It starts at the leadership, but our staff knowing that that's what they want is a good education for our students, but they also want to strike a balance with expectations of families. So we're all looking at the same end goal here, and I know it's been frustrating, and for that, I'm sorry. I'm apologizing for nature, but I am sorry, and I know it's been tough. So as we talk about instructional hours, just remember we're here to deliver a strong education. We need to give our districts the time they're asking to do it, and they've always delivered for us. And then the 14 minutes. Those districts doing 14 minutes, God love them. I don't get it. I don't know what you're going to do in 2 minutes a day per class that is going to get you the end game of your lesson plan fulfilled to the best of its ability. So I didn't understand it. I understand from an hours point. I don't understand it for what our eye on the prize is, and that is delivering the best education that we can do, and we need to empower our administration, our staff, with an environment, a structure, and a trust to get that done. And when it comes to that, they're doing it in less than 180 days, but they're doing fine work. So I've held my opinion for a long time. It felt really good, but I'm really hoping that June 21st is it. Thank you again for your patience. Get it out on Facebook. I know you're listening, guys. So put it on Facebook that we're looking at the 21st, and Mother Nature has the last word on that. But I'm excited with what you've put together tonight, and thank you for your work. Michael?
So just for clarification, that will be an agenda item in upcoming meetings?
We can. Whatever you want as an agenda item is yours.
I actually don't want it to be emphasis on 15 minutes. I just want it on emphasis of extending the school day and the challenges that would possibly bring and what would have to be a hurdle.
Yep. Marge?
If you don't mind, just because it's come up tonight, I'm just going to push it out a little bit because I know what you're going to be facing as a board in the upcoming meetings and so on. So I know it's an item that needs to be tackled, but we're going to start having schools come before you and so on. So just know I haven't forgotten it, but it won't be on next time's agenda just because of you've got a lot of guests coming to see you.
I don't think that it needs to be on next agenda at all. I think it's just I want to make sure that the public knows that we are going to address it. Definitely understand the upcoming meetings that are coming. Also, I don't think it's something we're just going to solve in a couple meetings if we were to decide that, and I actually don't think it will impact next year's schedule either. So I don't think timing is needed to be the next meeting at all. So thank you.
Cinda?
And I would just make a suggestion that when we do revisit that topic, that we basically recap the notes from when Amherst came 3 years ago. It's been a lot of time. Certainly Amherst doesn't have to come back and talk to us, but there's certain key points and key things that they had pointed out for us. And I think that for the sake of those that weren't on the board during that discussion, it would be really helpful to recap some of it was their lessons learned that they provided to us with that model.
Okay. Sounds good. With that, I guess we're going on to item number 6. It's the slippery slope from here, guys. So it's the approval of the March 20th, 2017 minutes. So I have a motion to accept, made by Cinda, seconded by Andy. Are there any edits or adjustments? Michael?
Page 2, line 86. I believe that's supposed to say proposed 2017 versus 2,917.
Forward-looking.
Yes, and then on in section 5 regarding snow impacts, I just want it noted that I did request that we did have a discussion about adding time to the calendar. I did make that request during that discussion, and it's not here in the notes.
That's
it. That's all mine.
Any others? Seeing none, we'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. I abstain, so the motion carries 401, and I abstain because I was not present for that meeting. And thank you for taking it. You did a great job. So we're on to item number 7, which is the acceptance of gifts and grants under $5,000 with Matt.
Thank you. This evening we have to the Merrimack School District from the Health Trust, Inc. in Concord, New Hampshire, a gift in the amount of $100. The gift was received by the Healthcare Cost Containment Committee for high participation on the web portal challenge and will be used for expenses related to communication with retirees regarding healthcare cost containment efforts. That is it, and we thank them very much for that contribution.
Is there a motion to accept? Made by Naomi, seconded by Andy. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0. Number 8 is the consent agenda with Mark McLaughlin.
So on consent tonight, we have the following. Approval of elected appointed school district officials policy. Approval of Cynthia Hess's request to administer surveys to upper elementary students for a doctoral study. And in addition, we have the following resignations and retirements. Andrew Gallagher, social studies teacher at Merrimack High School. Cynthia Baker, librarian at Merrimack High School. Karen Bonin, Mastrocola Elementary School. Ken Dougal, a music teacher at Merrimack High School. Maureen Newton, language arts teacher at Merrimack High School. Peter Petrino, social studies teacher at Merrimack High School. Sharon Silva, librarian at Mastrocola Upper Elementary School. And Emily Carter, principal of Mastrocola Elementary School.
Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda? Andy?
I move that we accept the consent agenda as read, and in particular, I'd like to state my appreciation at those longtime educators and administrators who have posted their intent to retire or resign in this at the end of this year.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Michael. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The motion carries 5-0. On to item number 9, which is other. Is there any correspondence to come before the board? Seeing none. Any comments from the board? Cinda.
I just wanted to say that I attended the Chief Justice Broderick presentation that was spoken of earlier, and it was really amazing. It was an incredible speaker. It was a real asset to have him come and speak at the district. I wish more people could really hear his message, more parents. I hope that we can get him back again someday to be able to deliver that amazing testimony that he did.
Yeah, and he did speak to the teachers that day, as they mentioned earlier, and we're looking to have him come back and speak to students. So I brought my daughter that night, and it was definitely, very, very well received. And I think there's a lot of people have a lot of care for that in this community. So thank you for bringing that up. So we're on to item number 10, which is new business. Any new business to come before the board? Seeing none. On to committee reports. Any committee reports? Andy?
Just a heads up that the Planning and Building Committee has tried a couple times to have meetings without quorum. They're going to try again for this coming Monday to have the meeting and then come to report to the school board, covering the area specifically around fields, the charge that we gave them around the athletic field, that's their intent to do.
Michael?
Sorry, I forgot about something. Can I go back to
Sure.
comments? I just wanted to thank the JMU's Upper Elementary School for letting me participate in the Enterprise City interview process with the children. I thought it was a great process to actually see the children put together the resumes. It definitely was very heartwarming for me to actually be part of that and see what the children brought to the table. And I thought all the children did a wonderful, wonderful job.
Excellent. And I forgot something too, which is on my little notes, which is that round 1 of the Grant State Challenge on New Hampshire Public Television, Comeback of the Century by Merrimack High School. And unfortunately, our student rep, Zev, who is a team captain, was not here to get the kudos because I'll just tell you, he rocked it. That whole team did, but he did a great job. I'm hoping that he gets to watch tape, but very proud. I mean, very good comeback. It was nail biter. So good job. Naomi?
I'll just add my second to what Michael was saying. I had a chance to do some of the interviews at Enterprise City as well, and it was a blast.
Fun. I've done it before. It's great. Cinda? The gang's all there.
And we did have a national champion, an 8th grader that made the national final, that made #1 in the nation, right, for 8th grade wrestling.
Yes.
Aiden.
Excellent. Lots of good news from Merrimack tonight. So, excellent. So with that, I think we're back off comments, still over new business. Committee reports are done. Public comments on agenda items. If you'd like to speak, again, name and address for the record.
Is that what we just previously discussed?
You can do it again. Yep, you can, absolutely. Yeah. We have a new one. And just make sure your light's on, that's all. Thank you.
Again, my name is Shannon. I want to reiterate about what you were talking about. You know, we have our education, and we in Merrimack, we do hold it to the highest esteem, and I agree with you with that. It's hard as a parent to see your kid, though, struggle during the June months and trying to pay attention. I'm very happy that both you, Mark and Marge, looked at the hours, because those are tough days, being in the school and being so hot for the kids. They're not learning anything during those last few days, especially when you're turning it over to the following Monday. The kids just are not there. And I thank you for looking into that. It shows that you did your due diligence, and I appreciate it. And so will my kids when I get home. They'll be very excited. So thank you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Have a good night.
You too. So we will take a moment to sign the manifest. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Made by Cindy, seconded by Michael. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0-0. Thank you and good night.